Well, just to sort of bring a close to my talk, the so-called three pillars of the Catholic Church in China, Xu Guangqi or Paul Shu, Li Zhicao, and Yang Tingyun, they were all converted largely because of Ricci's mastery of Chinese texts. One of the things that Ricci loved to do was he would take a fleeting glance at a page of Chinese texts, and he was able to memorize up to 400 characters. I've been studying Chinese I studied Chinese for over 12 years. I can't even fathom how difficult this is. About 40 to 400 characters. He would sit and memorize them, close, and then he would recite it both backwards and forwards for the Confucians who were present. Now, people were converted. Many people were converted because of his brilliance. Yet, there were those Confucians who admired him, like the Confucian philosopher Li Zhi, who was a Neo-Confucian, who was a good friend of Matteo Ricci, who said that he would gather with Ricci at banquets and they would have these long discussions on Confucianism and on Chinese thought. And what Li Zhi finally said was, in a letter to a friend, I have a friend from the West named Shitai, Matteo Ricci. He's brilliant. He's more polite than any of our Chinese. He has mastered our texts more than any of our highest level graduates in the civil service exam. He's better at our texts than we are. He can recite them from memory after a glance. But I don't know why he's here. Why is Ricci here? His final statement was, well, certainly he doesn't mean to come here and replace Confucius with his God. And my point really is that Ricci wasn't there to replace Confucius with his God. Ricci was really, his point was to fulfill what Confucius understood with the truth of revelation. And that was really his sort of the hill that he was moving up. So, is he a cultural ambassador? Is he the scientist Ricci, the Confucian Ricci? Or is he Father Ricci, the Catholic priest and an apologist for dialogue? In China, there are two groups of people today who honor Ricci. There are those who value his maps, his clocks, and his Western novelties. There are Buddhists who consider him to be a bodhisattva. There are Confucians who think he was really a Confucian and had converted to Chinese Confucianism and had left his religious point of view. But there are also those Catholics who I prayed with them at his tomb, who consider him an apologist for Christianity. Yes, Ricci did burn his personal letters. He burned his personal letters about this day. I was thinking about this as I flew in. It was about 3 days before he died, according to some texts, where he took his personal letters and burned them. And we have no idea why. And certainly there's a large number of Chinese people who say, well, what he was burning was proof that he left his faith and became more of a Chinese person. But certainly those people I prayed with consider him to be, in a sense, they're waiting for him to be canonized. He's Li Sheng, he's Saint Li. Not canonized yet, but he's the person who brought Christianity to them. He brought them the Eucharist. He brought them churches. He brought them theology. He brought them Christian morality. And most of all, in their words, he brought them salvation. So they're waiting for Ricci to be more recognized. This is a great year in China because this is the year that the world is, if we're all listening to the Pope's call for us to celebrate this Jubilee year in honor of Matteo Ricci, from the Chinese church's point of view, this is a moment wherein the world knows just how important Christianity is in China, that a great Christian went to China. At the end of his book, and I wanted to end with a quote, I talked about this earlier, at the end of his Tianzhu Shiri, the true meaning of the Lord of Heaven, that has converted so many Chinese people in the past and still does today. There's so many things to say about Ricci that it's almost impossible to encapsulate them in an hour lecture. But at the end of his book, he said, the Holy Church, this is a quote, the Holy Church, the Holy Catholic Church, has sacred water, which it uses to those who enter its gates. Everyone who wants to follow this way, this is important, he uses the word Dao. Ricci was smart. He uses the word Tao. That's the same Tao that is used in Taoism, which Taoism, as we sometimes say, is Taoism. He says that this water brings us into the Tao. So you Taoists, this water brings you into the real way. Because Taoism means wayism. So Ricci is saying, Taoists, I have the real way. Confucius said, if in the morning you hear the Tao, and at night you die, then you've made it. That's good. So Ricci is also saying, and the way he words it is very Confucian. You Confucians, you're now hearing the Tao. You're now hearing the way. So you've made it. That is, the way for Taoists is in this faith that has baptism. The way for Confucians is in this way that Confucius mentions. Those who deeply repent of their past wrongdoings and who sincerely wish to turn away from their transgressions, to do good and receive the sacred water, to understand the way, the real way, will receive the love of the Tianju, the Lord of Heaven, and will have all his former evil forgiven. He will be like a newborn child. End quote. That's how he ends his text. And from Ricci's point of view, that was the text that he wrote. It's the text, the most important thing that he wrote. So Ricci filled many roles in China, and the world can rightly appreciate his ability to build cultural, scientific, and technological bridges between two very different cultures. Very different cultures. Before Ricci, before John of Monte Corvino, before the Nestorians, I could confidently say China has never had an idea of a creatio ex nihilo. There is no creation from nothing. It can't exist. Ricci brought for the first time a way that the Chinese people were actually saying, I understand what the concept of creation is, what the concept of an omnipotent God is. There was no notion of anything that was meta, that was beyond this realm. Ricci succeeded in bridging intellectual gaps and spiritual and theological gaps that I think had never really been able to be bridged in the past. Well, he bridged many aspects of two very different cultures. In his private journals, his letters, and scores of Latin, Italian, and Chinese books, Matteo Ricci reveals himself to be an apologist for dialogue. A dialogue that above all leads people to Christ. But he didn't want to lead people to Christ by erasing their culture, their Rome. He wanted to bring them to Christ in a way that allows Christianity to be leaven into what was already there. And it's a problematic question. Even I ask this question. How do you do this?